That if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is GBN Tonight. And it was the big speech of the conference so far from Suella Braverman. But is she really serious about stopping the boats? I'll be asking the one and only Nigel Farage live from Manchester. Plus, is he going to rescue the Tories? Meanwhile, in my big opinion, I tackle reports that NHS staff are being given paid leave for the male menopause. You heard me right. So with almost 8 million Brits languishing on a waiting list, has the country's health service completely lost the plot? Standing by to give their unfiltered views are my panel tonight: Carol McGiffin, Suzanne Evans and Rebecca Reid. In the clash, is Kemi Badenoch right that Britain is the best place in the world to be a black person? We will debate that with, among others, GB News superstar Nana Akua. Plus, as shocking footage emerges of the Have-A-Go heroes intervening in an alleged shoplifting incident, are the public right to step in? And does the rise of vigilantes reveal how powerless our police have become? Well, we'll speak to former top cop Harry Miller, who lays down the law shortly. And also a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and we will crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. So buckle up for 2 hours of big opinion, big debates, and a splash of entertainment along the way. Lots to get through, but first the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the Home Secretary has warned of a future hurricane of mass migration into the UK in her speech to the Tory party conference in Manchester today. Suella Braverman said that as well as stopping illegal migration from coming to the UK, she'll also make sure that legal migration is held at reasonable levels. GB News presenter Nigel Farage criticised the speech, saying the government was out of touch with ordinary voters. But Ms Braverman said the only way into the UK is via legal routes.
The Legal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda.
Well, the Prime Minister told GB News today he's the person to deliver change to Britain. Rishi Sunak defended his record on illegal immigration, saying for the first time ever, the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France was down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on policy.
You've got Keir Starmer, who, no one knows what he stands for, flip-flops left and right. The country can see through that. That's not leadership. What I'm offering is different. I know people want change. I'm the person to deliver it because we're going to do politics differently. You saw that on net zero. You'll see that this week. That's what you get from a Conservative government.
And away from the Tory party conference, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was dismissive of disaster. The UK COVID-19 inquiry has been hearing today. The Bereaved Families for Justice group says there was a leadership void in the early days of the crisis. And they went on to accuse Mr Johnson of cavalier public messaging just weeks before the first lockdown. The inquiry also heard that key WhatsApp messages by the then Prime Minister are unrecoverable. A 17-year-old boy who stabbed a 15-year-old girl to death in Croydon last week will face a murder trial in the spring. The youth, who can't be identified due to his age, allegedly repeatedly stabbed Eliane Adnam while she was on her way to school. The boy, who knew the victim, fled the scene but was arrested in South London just over an hour after the attack. And lastly, the Prince and Princess of Wales were in Cardiff today to meet members of the Windrush generation. Prince William and Kate greeting Windrush veterans and their descendants during their visit, marking the start of Black History Month. They met with organisations at the Grange Pavilion Community Centre to hear about their contribution to the Welsh community. And the well-known competitive royal couple also joined in with a quick game of table tennis at the Forum as well. That's it on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, this story raised my temperature tonight and gave me clammy hands. A trust within the NHS, which claims, of course, that it's in a funding crisis, is set to give male staff up to 12 months of paid leave if they've got, wait for it, the male menopause. Local ambulance chiefs have reportedly been told to give consideration to men who experience the change at this point in their lives. Managers at the trust have been told they should provide additional uniforms, portable fans, change shift patterns and give time off for sick leave for male staff members experiencing these problems. The justification for this insanity is that men suffer menopause symptoms because of a drop in testosterone levels. Well, they've got some balls wasting taxpayers' money like this. Yes, apparently when men reach their 50s, they get a whole host of symptoms, including erectile dysfunction and weight gain. No shit, Sherlock. You don't need a year's paid leave or a special uniform. You need to give up the donuts and the pints of lager and go to the bloody gym. The male menopause do me a favour. This story would be funny if it wasn't so serious. The NHS has stressed that this is not a national policy, but it reflects the culture of our health service now, which is separated from reality. Steeped in gender ideology, which ignores the basic facts of human biology, which is a bit worrying within a health system, NHS leaflets now talk about birthing humans, chest feeders and people who menstruate. It's a health service on its knees financially, with a waiting list of almost 8 million people, employing an army of diversity officers, not a role that will cure your cancer or fix your back pain. The NHS has huge organisational problems too. Far too many middle managers on six-figure salaries. They pay too much for drugs, they pay too much for freelance workers, and they pay too much for someone to install a light bulb. When a contractor does a job for the NHS, they add an extra zero. Who cares when it's not your money? The philosophy and the values by which the service is now run is deeply flawed. It's a national sickness service, seeking to hand out medication rather than prevent illness. More money than ever goes into the NHS, and yet we are sicker than ever. We should be asking for our money back. Now, I love the nurses and the doctors. The system is flawed, but the individuals are world class. But the decision by consultants on six-figure salaries to go on strike is another reputational blow to our health service and a demonstration of its failing culture. Now, the nurses in particular deserve a pay rise, but for anyone in the healthcare profession to withdraw their labour is, in my opinion, an egregious betrayal of what they signed up for. People boast that the NHS is the largest employer in the world. That's not a boast. That is proof of its wild inefficiency. I love the NHS and I want it to prevail, but it's got to shrink, be more efficient and focus on illness prevention rather than the management of disease. But of course, they're more worried about sweaty middle-aged men getting hot at work. With 500,000 people going private in the last year alone, the NHS risks becoming like the BBC, paid for by everyone, but only used by some, at which point it has a crisis of credibility and a crisis of authority. It's not helped by stories like this one, grown men being paid for a year off for their so-called male menopause, whatever that is. I'll be honest, this story gave me a hot flush and swollen ankles. The NHS has lost the plot. It's enough to make you sick. And is it just me? Or is it quite hot in here? OK, let's get reaction from my top superstar panel tonight. Columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, political commentator Suzanne Evans, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Carol, male menopause, do me a favour.
It just gets more ludicrous every day, doesn't it? I mean, you only have to look through, you know, one of the papers that you wouldn't normally read to see how many vacancies, yeah, how many vacancies there are for people for non-jobs with huge salaries. It really is. It's pathetic. It's almost like forget about the patients. It's got nothing to do with you. This is just a giant, horrible, monstrous building of bureaucracy. And I think that the rot set in, especially with what you mentioned there, with changing a light bulb cost like £1,000, or, you know, they pay too much for stupid bits of equipment.
£5 like for a packet of paracetamol that you can get for 50p at Morrison's.
39p in Boots.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Didn't realise you were such a fan.
Well, we're
Have I given you a
advertising all
headache?
the major supermarkets.
You might do. But I do think that the rot set in there with the PFI obsession. And the thing is, quite a lot of the time, the maintenance contracts are tied in with the loans for the buildings, aren't they? Yeah. So they don't have a choice but to pay that. And it's like, it's crippling. But nobody in the NHS seems to care too much.
The only other thing is, does it not dilute the notion of the female menopause, which is a very real hormonal change? I think it trivialises it. I think this is an insult to women.
Yeah, but you know what, Mark? I mean, you know, not every single woman has to make a big meal out of it, do they? And I know that that's not a good thing to
when
say.
It happens
when I've got all women on the panel.
When it happens to you, you will change your words.
No, it's happened to me. I've had it.
Well, it's happened to me, and I have to say, I was working so hard, I didn't notice it. So there's lots of stuff out there at the moment, women, about menopause being awful. It doesn't have to be like that. I really didn't.
But there are women. You must know women who go through hell. I've got viewers and listeners.
My mother went through hell.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got friends
Headaches,
who went through
hot
hell.
flushes, the lot.
And I think you're right. This idea of a male menopause, which, let's face it, is not something that's medically recognised, and yet they can have 12 months off. It is nonsense, and it could only happen. 12 I'm afraid. Months. That's what Mark said.
Up to 12 months, and also extra uniforms and fans and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and this could only happen, I'm afraid, in a public sector organisation that has just got so bloated and so woke and so overfunded as opposed to being super efficient. This couldn't happen in a private business. They go bust within a month. I mean, what man wouldn't like to take 12 months off to go and buy a motorbike
Have
or
their midlife
ride their new
crisis.
sports car or
But
find a new mistress or whatever it
Rebecca.
might
That's
be.
all it is.
I think the midlife crisis thing is possibly a good point, but I think that if this is the way that we can open up to talking about the difficulties that men experience often in their 50s, it may be a good thing, because it is sort of mid-40s to mid-50s is a very difficult time in terms of men's mental health and men's behaviour. And I think we sometimes write off the fact that women are very good about supporting each other and about sort of looking to our mental health, and we have much more of a peer group system. Men don't tend to have that amongst their friends, and it isn't as medically recognised either. We all know men are less likely to go to the doctor, less likely to seek mental health support. I think what they're trying to do here is say sometimes men really lose their way at this point and they should be supported by their employer.
Indeed, but I think calling it the menopause is an insult to women. I mean, why have men got to muscle in on all of the female things now? You know, men are participating in women's sport. They want to be arrested and go to women's jail.
Say if men would like to do more of the parenting and domestic labour, I'm very happy with that. If any men want to come and do my washing up, I'm very comfortable with that.
Call it sort of middle-age health issues, but calling it a menopause, I honestly...
12 months off.
I think...
but that's got to be really rare, right?
We don't get 12 months off of menopause.
Yeah, well,
actually, we need...
we
might need 3 or 4 years
so
off.
some private sector employers now, for instance, I think Channel 4 are very good about having menopause leave in the same way that you can take menstrual leave if you're having really significant problems. But it should be the exception, not the rule. And the other thing I would say...
Why do we need menstrual leave or menopause leave? Why can't
if you have
good old-fashioned sick leave? I'm not well for whatever reason it might be, physical or mental, and call it sick leave.
Well, the big problem is that
to kind of, put every little thing into its own tiny little box.
We shouldn't accept that like crippling menstrual problems or crippling menopause problems are normal. It's not. You should be getting you should be getting support for that. No. It shouldn't be ruining your life to have your period or have menopause. And I think we don't do enough to look after those things.
Tell your employer that I've got crippling menstrual cramps. That's why I need time off, as opposed to just saying I'm sorry, I'm sick today.
I honestly,
do you take time off when you have menstrual cramps, Mark?
Well, I'm cramping as we speak.
Are they sympathy cramps?
Because I'm very excited to be around all three of you. The bottom line is that, the menopause is a very real condition for women, and millions of women around the world. I mean, the stories...
It's a natural thing as well.
For sure.
Don't forget that it's a natural
Right, but what is the male menopause?
Every single
this
woman.
feels, Carol, this is like the man flu, which, of course, is far worse than the flu that women get.
But technically, of course it is.
I mean, men are the worst hypochondriacs, I think.
Tell me about it.
I can't believe I'm defending men.
And what do you know? Listen, do you know anything about these men in their 50s going through symptoms? I mean, any personal experience of that?
Yeah.
Have you met a menopausal man?
Well, not menopausal, no, but just, people who've gone... A lot of my friends have gone completely crackers for a few years. I mean, literally changing what they wear, what they do, what they
Look, I think we all go
eat,
through a midlife crisis.
It is a crisis.
I've got a lot of friends who are suddenly getting I'm 31. I've got a lot of friends who are suddenly getting siblings from their dads who have left their mums and started again.
Okay.
And that is a terrifying thing to do to your life. And I think you must be quite unhappy. And I think maybe if we supported people better, we might not have so much of that happening.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, what do you think about this? How do you feel about your taxpayer cash being funneled into the support of people with the male menopause? This from Alan, who says, Mark, this is madness. This will bleed the NHS dry. Lee says, I think the issue here lies in what they're calling it, because it relates to what women get. If they called it something different, maybe it wouldn't be frowned upon as much as it is being. Listen, I'll get more emails on that shortly. Can I get your quick, immediate snapshot response to Suella Braverman's speech? It's the big political story of the day. Do you think what she has said today, Suzanne, will chime with British public opinion? She talked about a potential hurricane of immigration into the country.
I think it will certainly chime with the significant percentage of the population that actually don't want to see open borders, that want to see immigration controlled, and absolutely sick to death of the Tories promising for decades to get it down to the tens of thousands. Yeah, I thought her speech was fantastic.
OK, well, we'll be debating it with Nigel Farage in just a few minutes. Is Suella Braverman really serious about stopping the vote? Nigel is up very shortly, live from Manchester. Plus, by the way, I'll be asking him, is he going to save the Tories? But coming up, as shocking footage emerges of the Have-A-Go heroes intervening in an alleged shoplifting incident, are the public right to step in? And does the rise of vigilantes reveal how powerless our police have become? We'll debate that next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
An NHS trust is paying male workers to stay at home if they've got symptoms of male menopause. That's right. Your reaction, well, very strong on email. Richard says this is just another reason to reform the out-of-control, bloated, tax-rinsing NHS. Keith says, Mark, strange how it's taken the world until 2023 to discover that men go through the menopause. Could that be because it doesn't exist? And Yvonne says, Mark, I'm listening and looking like something that sits on the back shelf of a Cortina, shaking my head in disbelief. I'll get to more of your emails shortly, mark@gbnews.com. Now, with policing in a perilous state, groups of Brits who have been coined the Have-A-Go heroes have begun taking the law into their own hands. Take a look at this dramatic moment when alleged shoplifters tried to make a quick getaway, only to be stopped in their tracks.
Stop resisting! What's my teeth? Stop resisting! What's my teeth? Stay there. What's my teeth? Release your arm! Release your arm! Release your arm now!
Now, for clarity, that is members of the public taking charge. It then reportedly took more than half an hour for the actual police to arrive. I'm joined by former police officer Harry Miller. Harry, 2 of the men have been arrested and released on conditional bail, so we'll avoid getting into the specifics of this case. But What do you think about this story? What does it say about the state of law and order in this country that the public are now stepping in?
I watched that footage, and I suspect, like most of your viewers, I was absolutely overjoyed to see it. It's about time that sort of thing happened, because we have a real problem in this country at the moment. We have police not turning up unless it's something incredibly important, like organised crime gangs, like county lines, or like misgendering, for instance. But when it comes to things like shoplifting, you cannot rely on the police arriving. Now, the public knows this, but more to the point, the criminal also knows this. There is no expectation of being caught. Shoplifting is a $1 billion industry in this country, around about £950 million. That's more than the Brinkmax robbery. Way more. Because it comes in dribs and drabs, it's not given the serious attention that it should be given. So it's no wonder, really, that the public are doing the job that the police are paid to do.
Yes, the Co-op supermarket have talked about 1,000 incidents a day. Do the public who step in deserve more legal protection? Because, Harry, as you know, quite often if you apprehend somebody that's breaking the law, you're the one that could get in trouble.
No, not really, because we've always had the right, as the public, to make an arrest when there is a crime taking place. We're allowed to do that now.
Are you sure?
Yes, 100% certain, yes. This is something that is misunderstood. The police operate, for the most part, on common law powers of arrest. So when a theft is taking place, the police operate under the same power that the general public operate under. That, for instance, store detectives operate under. We are allowed to make these arrests, providing that we have reasonable suspicion that a crime is taken place. If it is taking place, we can make the arrest. Now, the worrying thing here is that with the increase in knife crime and violent crime, up, according to some, 25% in the year, we have to be a little bit careful. We have to do a on-the-spot risk assessment, whether or not we, as the members of the public, we don't carry tasers, we don't have radio communications, we don't have a baton or anything like that, we don't have any body protection. We have to make a risk assessment. Should we get involved? Now, that is something that you have to do on an incident-by-incident basis. But in principle, I think it's absolutely right that members of the public step in and collar these nutters. They've every right to do so, and I think, absent of the police doing it, the public should consider doing it.
I mean, I had the Coronation Street actor Charlie Lawson on my show a few days ago, and he said if you see someone shoplifting, you should beat the crap out of them. I said that that's not a good idea. That would be against the law. Surely you wouldn't encourage that?
No, of course you don't need to beat the crap out of them. What you're allowed to do, you are allowed to use reasonable force. Reasonable force to stop the theft taking place and to detain the miscreant until the police arrive. You are allowed to do that. Now, the force will always be relative to the amount of force, the amount of resistance that the shoplifter is exerting on you to get away. But in principle, you're absolutely right. You can use whatever reasonable force is necessary to stop the theft and detain the person until the police arrive. But, and again, this is the word of caution, we have to be careful because knife crime is on the increase.
I mean, if you had a loved one that was witnessing a shoplifting incident, would you want them to act? What if they got stabbed to death?
Well, exactly. That's why I say you have to do a risk assessment.
Well, how do you do that, Harry? You haven't got X-ray specs, have you?
No, you don't. You don't have X-ray specs. No, but you've got to make a judgment. You've got to make a judgment. If it's somebody who's tooled up, I'm going to step back and simply take notes about who they are. If it's somebody that I consider to be just an opportunist thief, I will consider whether I'm able to physically overpower them and stop them. Everybody has to make that risk assessment. I'm not advising members of the public to go racing in where angels fear the tread. Not at all. But we have the right to do that. And the other thing is this. Where are our police? I remember when I was a police officer, you hadn't done a shift unless you'd nabbed, unless you'd collared a shoplifter. Now, in effect, shoplifting has been decriminalised Lord Rose, the chairman of ASDA, has said precisely that shoplifting is so far down the list of what's important to the police that in effect it's become decriminalised. Now then, Pride season is over, thank goodness, so hopefully the police may be able to turn their attention to solving and preventing crime. But I don't hold out too much hope.
Yeah, I mean, where are the police going wrong? Is it resource? Is it the culture? Is it policy?
All of that. All of that. I mean, the police are under-resourced. They're over-paperworked. They're expected to do a mental health analysis. They're expected to babysit people who've injured themselves whilst they've been committing a crime. Entire shifts are lost where police officers are babysitting, criminals at hospitals. Because all you need to do is say, oh, I've hurt my head, I banged my head. And then the police are obliged to look after the welfare of that person, take them to hospital, and before you know it, an entire shift has disappeared. So we have a systemic problem. We also have a political problem because there doesn't appear to be the political will to police and prosecute these so-called minor crimes. Well, they're not minor crimes. If you're a shopkeeper and you are having your stock taken away from you on a daily basis, it's not a minor crime, it's a major crime. It's a threat to your livelihood. So the police need to reprioritise. On this, Suella Braverman is absolutely 100% correct. The police need to turn up to thefts, they need to turn up to burglaries, they need to turn up to all of the so-called small crimes. Now, in order to free up a little bit of time, they need to stop policing pronouns. They need to stop ringing up members of the public because they rejected a trans pride shopping bag, which is what happened just the other day in Nottingham. They need to stop going on pride marches. They need to stop attending Black Lives Matter critical race theory conferences. And they need to get out onto the street and doing the fundamental job that a police officer is paid to do. That is collaring criminals.
Harry, last but not least, can I ask you about the Met Police, who many years ago were described as institutionally racist, which is, of course, an enormous shame on that resource, an absolute disgrace. Do you think that British policing is now institutionally woke?
Yes, it's absolutely institutionally woke. 100%. And they tell us this. They fly the flags, they go on the conferences, they do absolutely everything within their power to turn our police force, our average British bobby, into a woke member of the Stasi. That's what's happening. There are so many conferences, there are so many marches, police WhatsApp groups are being policed by one another's colleagues. If you tell an off-colour joke, for instance, there's a positive obligation for you to be reported. You can't exercise black humour. I don't know whether I'm supposed to say use the phrase black humour, by the way. That's where we're at, unfortunately. So, yes, we have a politically ideological police. We need to get rid of that, start again, and have the police policing crime. That's what we...
Harry Miller for Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, eat your heart out. Harry, thanks for your time. We'll catch up soon. In The Clash, is Kemi Badenoch right that Britain is the best place in the world to be a black person? We'll debate that with GB News superstar Nana Akua and a writer and anti-racist campaigner, Femi Nylander. But first, it was the big speech of conference so far from Suella Braverman. But is she really serious about stopping the boats? The one and only Nigel Farage joins me live from Manchester to discuss that next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So the public are taking the law into their own hands and tackling shoplifters. This from Class, who says, "Hi, Mark. Finally, the public are stepping in on criminals like shoplifters, and it is fantastic. Well done to these brave people." Meanwhile, Lulu says, "Mark, I'm surprised they haven't nicked the blokes who apprehended the thieves. Our police are too preoccupied with kneeling at the altar of woke. They have become a complete laughingstock." I'll get to more of your emails shortly. But of course, it was the big speech of the day. Suella Braverman talking tough on illegal immigration and levels of net migration. But is she serious about stopping the boats? Where's the substance? Let's go to Manchester now. And GB News' very own Nigel Farage. Nigel, were you convinced by what you heard?
No, we've heard it all before. All the right analysis, all the right rhetoric, maybe even stronger than Priti Patel, but no solutions offered whatsoever. And Mark, unbelievably, the whole conference was waiting to hear about the ECHR, and you know what? She didn't even mention it. She talked about the Human Rights Act, but didn't mention ECHR withdrawal. Now, some say Rishi will spring this on us tomorrow. I'm not so sure.
Indeed, and of course the ECHR, that would be the tangible message that this government is serious about stopping the boats. Do they have any credibility if taking the ECHR off the table is an option?
In my view, absolutely none. Unless you can deport people, you cannot stop the criminal traffickers from collecting their €5,000 a time. As I say, maybe Rishi Sunak will speak about it tomorrow, but so far from this conference, there's not one big, strong, positive message. I thought her speech today, she's better at speaking in public and all the rest of it, but in terms of what she's actually going to do, she was like a toothless puppy.
So you're not convinced, Nigel. Why did you go up to conference this year?
Well, Two reasons, really, Mark. One, of course, to cover stuff for GB News. The second, to assess the mood and maybe cause a bit of mischief. And what I've found is overwhelmingly the delegates believe in the things I'm saying, believe in the campaigns I've been pushing. And, you know, much of it, you know, we are hearing, aren't we, Liz Truss. We are hearing politicians in the Conservative Party now saying things that I've been saying for the best part of 20 years. So I like to think my presence here gives some influence.
Well, indeed, and your rapturous reception tells us that the movement itself, the grassroots Conservatives, want to have a Conservative Party again, but they don't have one.
No, and you know, the funny thing is this, the centre of gravity of where the MPs are is just a mile away from where the activists and where the voters are. This party has now become a social democrat, big state, big surveillance, big tax, mass legal immigration party. They're nowhere. They're nowhere. Sunak has one chance. We saw a couple of weeks ago on net zero some sensible moves, but tomorrow is his one big chance to put out a message. I just don't know, though, whether he's really got it in him.
Indeed, this could be rhetoric, and of course they will pay the price at the ballot box. But would not Labour be worse in terms of stopping the boats and controlling levels of legal migration as well, Nigel? Do you have to be careful what you wish for?
How could they be worse? How could it possibly be worse? If I'd said to you in 2010, over 100,000 young men would cross the English Channel in dinghies, you wouldn't have believed me. If I'd said to you in 2010, when Cameron took power, that legal net migration would be running at 600,000 a year, you wouldn't have believed me. Can Labour really be worse than that?
Now, of course, the Conservative Party is the most established and oldest political party in European political history. Therefore, it's an impressive platform. They may well lose the next election, Nigel, but don't you think you could revive their fortunes? I mean, Rishi Sunak has said in an interview that he wouldn't rule out welcoming you into the party. He's shown you a bit of leg.
Well, I guess he has in a way, although had he rejected it, I think half the conference hall would have walked out when he spoke yesterday, so he didn't have much option on that, really. I mean, look, I wouldn't join the party now, as it's currently constructed, but what's really been happening here over the course of the last few days, forget what's happening in the hall, it's on the fringe. That's where the energy is. You've got the One Nation lot saying there are 80 of us, nothing must change. And then you've got the Trussite wing saying we've got to become a party of low tax, a party of entrepreneurs. What's really happening here, they're jockeying for which wing wins after they lose the next election. If the right wing were to win, well then, you know what, I think about it.
Indeed. Would you include Suella Braverman in that sort of Trussite group?
Yes, oh yes. I mean, look, she talks the talk on many of these things. She's a genuine Brexiteer. She's the only member of the cabinet that went all the way and voted 3 times against Liz Truss's appalling deal. No, she is genuine in her convictions, but what tends to happen is these MPs get senior office and somehow they seem to change. Today was, from her, I thought, a very big disappointment.
Interesting stuff. Damning words. Nigel, let's take a look at a little bit of dance floor action last night at conference. I think you might be involved. Take a look. Forget about sleeping with the enemy, dancing with the enemy, Nigel. It's a love-in.
It was just a normal night out for me, Mark. I do this sort of thing every evening. Nothing very exceptional about it at all. But I tell you what, the GB News party was the social event of this conference. And well done to everybody at our channel for making it such a great fun, and I mean fun, event.
Yes, Nigel, we haven't spoken. I'll let you go in a second, and thank you so much for all of your brilliant on-air contributions today. But we haven't spoken since a lot of drama that befell this channel in recent days. Of course, we won't get into the details, but the establishment have seized upon this opportunity to try to shut us down. Will they succeed?
I mean, Adam Bolton, God help us. Adam Bolton saying we should be closed down because there is an ecology in broadcasting. I've been here before. You know, they wanted UKIP closed down because they couldn't bear us. There is no way they're going to close GB News down. We did make, last week, some very bad mistakes as a channel. But hey, we haven't hosted Russell Brand or Jimmy Savile. We haven't suggested acid be thrown over public figures. It wasn't good, but we'll not only survive it, we'll thrive from it. And I tell you what, when you're here at this conference, you realise this channel now has serious influence in public life in Britain, and we should all, yourself included, be very proud of that.
Amen to that. Nigel, I'd love to buy you a pint. Have a brilliant evening and we'll catch up soon. GB News star Nigel Farage. Fascinating stuff. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. Nigel not happy with Suella Braverman's speech. He said she's talking the talk, but there's no substance, no content. Exactly what Anne Widdecombe told me a couple of nights ago on my show. Well, Anne is back with her verdict before 11 o'clock. So, folks, lots to get through. Coming up, as Policing Minister Chris Philp reveals plans for police to check all thieves caught on CCTV against the country's passport database. Is this kind of intrusion a necessary step to tackle lawlessness and take back control of our country, or is it Orwellian overreach? My panel debate that shortly. But next, as shocking footage emerges of the Have-A-Go heroes intervening in an alleged incident, what do you think about the public stepping in? Mark at gbnews.com. So much to get through. Next up, we will be debating something very fascinating, which is Britain the best place in the world for a black person to reside? We'll debate that with GB News superstar Nana Akua in The Clash next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. The NHS finally loses the plot. That is the topic of my big opinion, which you can catch on Twitter shortly. Wendy, bravo, Mark. I agree with you wholeheartedly on your monologue about giving male staff a year off for menopause symptoms instead of ploughing more money into a bottomless pit. The NHS needs to be overhauled. It would be laughable, if not worryingly possible. How about this from Rudy, who says, hi, Mark. Men do get a type of menopause, but it's unhelpful to call it men's menopause. Thank you for that. And I'll get to more of your emails shortly, but it's time now for The Clash. And in a punchy speech at the Tory party conference in Manchester, Kemi Badenoch was sticking the boot into Labour for its position on trans rights and for peddling a, quote, narrative of hopelessness for young black Brits. She also made this headline-grabbing claim. Take a listen.
I tell my children that this is the best country in the world to be black, because it is a country that sees people, not labels. We believe, as Martin Luther King once said, people should be judged by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin.
So is Kemi Badenoch right? Is Britain the best country in the world to be a black person? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com or on Twitter at gbnews. To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome GB News superstar presenter Nana Akua and the brilliant writer and anti-racism campaigner Femi Nylander. Femi, let me start with you. Do you agree with Kemi Badenoch?
I mean, not really. There's plenty of countries in the world. There's a large number of countries in the planet, and I don't see any reason to say that Britain is the best country in the world to be black. I mean, it depends on who you are. I will say this, that Britain generally, compared to other countries, is a very wealthy country, and therefore, in terms of many of the metrics by which we measure life satisfaction, such as life expectancy, such as general household wealth, access to kind of basic fundamentals such as food, water, it's quite high up. But at the same time, part of the reason that it's high up is because of its history of exploiting black people in other parts of the world. And so it's a bit like if I was in a field, if I was a rabbit in a field and there were white rabbits and black rabbits and green rabbits, and one of the groups of rabbits went and took all the carrots, brought them over here, and then said, well, this corner of the field is the best corner for anyone to live in, then yeah, it is, but we have to ask why it is.
Briefly, before I come to Nana, Femi, surely Britain is a better place for people of colour than France, Italy, most of Eastern Europe and the United States?
So France, Italy, most of Eastern Europe and the United States. I would definitely say in France, for example, one of the things that we recognise in the UK that people don't recognise in France is race. So in France, you have this idea that you cannot be black or white or Arab, at least in terms of a national sense. There's no census which actually measures this stuff. You're French and that's it. And that's why they don't have data which tells them the percentage of black people that are stopped and searched compared to white people, or the percentage of black people in the criminal justice system. Something we do have here is those statistics. We have those statistics, we have that information, and I would say that is something the UK does better than France. But I would also say that one of the things that Kemi was trying to push with her speech is the idea that we shouldn't necessarily have that, and we should just see people and we shouldn't see race, even if race is a reality in society. And there are many inequalities in society which are based upon race. So I will concede that, for example, in America, they have guns, which means that their racism can get a lot more violent, sometimes with police brutality. I will concede that, that in Eastern Europe, in some parts of Eastern Europe, you have some very, very intense racism against migrants and the rest. But I don't think that absolves the UK of also being a place that has a lot of issues with race.
What do you think, Nana? Does Kemi Badenoch have a point?
Well, in my experience, I think she does, yes. It is literally the best country that I've been to as a black person. I've been all across Europe. I faced a lot of racism there. I lived in America for some time. That was incredibly segregated and quite racist. Australia, there are very few people of colour there. They have their issues too. This country definitely rates as one of the top. I mean, it actually sounds like Femi is agreeing with Kemi with what he's saying there. because obviously, I mean, Femi, you've got, you graduated from Oxford University, one of the best universities in the world, if not many would say possibly the best. So this country has a lot to offer. And although there may be some barriers to entry in terms of colour, if you see it that way, there certainly weren't that many for you, because you're in the top teeny tiny percentile of people that went to that university. So I think you are an example of, how being black in this country doesn't necessarily become a hindrance. And I absolutely agree with Kemi when she talks about the fact that often we are doing down black people in terms of our narrative, even putting us in BAME and stuff like that, putting these little categories in the way that's kind of marginalised black people. And what she's saying, and I used to lecture in schools, is that there is this narrative that kind of allows black people to accept that they will be, prejudiced against, and it's going to be terrible, and Whereas my dad always used to say, there's no such word as can't, it's won't. And he would say, there sometimes is a glass ceiling, but it's made of glass, break it. He used to tell me that forget colour, just get on with the job.
However, Nana, are you not gaslighting victims of racism in this country by saying it is the best place in the world to be of colour?
Well, not really, because I've been a victim of racism myself, but I've been a victim of racism in Ghana. When I went to Ghana, I was told to go back to where I came from. So they were looking at the way I was dressed, looking at me and telling me that I didn't belong there. So no, I'm not gaslighting. I accept there's racism, but that's not going to stop anytime soon. People are racist, even to black people. I get more racism from black people towards me than I do from white people. So to be honest, racism exists, and we accept that in any walk of life, wherever you are. But I would say that this country is one of the least racist, if not the least racist, that I have been to.
Well, indeed. I mean, don't you think, Femi, the narrative that Britain is a country riven with racism is being deployed and leveraged by political figures to divide us?
No, certainly not. I think that I do have to say that I do disagree with Kemi. And I mean, in America, there's black people that go to Harvard. In France, there's black people that go to top universities. Of course, you're always going to have some exceptions to the rule. But when you look at education in this country, it is quite segregated. Nonetheless, no, I think that when we look at the criminal justice system, when we look at housing, when we look at the imbalances of wealth between black people and Pakistani people and white people, when we look at any of these metrics, or we look at things like the Windrush scandal, or even if we look at some of the rhetoric which is thrown around on issues of migration, we can still see that the UK has a long way to go with race on a structural level, as well as a level of rhetoric. And that's something which is just in the data, which is clear.
OK. Femi, sorry to interrupt you. Final thoughts, because the clock's against us. Nana, there are lots of lefty progressives in this country who get furious when data emerges that Britain isn't as racist as they claim.
Yeah, well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, I get bored of these words, structural racism and all that kind of thing, because that then absolves individuals of being racist, and it sort of palms off the responsibility of the racism to some sort of structure that's been put in place that's not enabled them to do well. Look, historically, because more white people have lived in this country than black, as far as we know, as far as we can see, then you're going to find that more white people will be wealthier in a sense, because they're the landowners initially. So that's how that comes about. And I know Femi also mentioned the slave trade, and it's got a terrible history and all of that. But I think, once again, let's not forget that black people did sell their people to become slaves. And the British people were the first to try and abolish the slave trade and also pay off slave owners so that they wouldn't be out of pocket to try and allow them to finish the trade properly. So, we have to be realistic and when we're talking about those things. Acknowledge that, yes, Britain played a big part in it, but Britain also, so did the people in Africa, and also so did Britain play a big part in stopping it.
Fascinating debate. My thanks to Nana Akua, who is back on Saturday on GB News, and writer and anti-racist campaigner Femi Nylander. Thank you both. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. Is Kemi Badenoch right that Britain is the best place in the world for somebody of colour to reside? Now, Now, coming up, as trans women are banned from female hospital wards and the government commit to restoring biological fact in science, is the woke tide turning? I'll be speaking to Professor Carol Sikora, the top doctor whose cries for common sense in the health service saw him targeted in a cancellation campaign. But next, is Suella Braverman right to blame the failure to control illegal immigration on fears of being called racist? My superstar panel debate that next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather bulletin. We have some pretty wet weather to come across northern parts through the next 24 hours, but further south it is a drier picture, and that's because of this area of high pressure that's going to build and lead to a quieter spell as we go through the rest of the week for southern areas. Further north, and tightly packed isobars show that it's blustery, and we have a weather system that's going to push in as we go through tonight and into Wednesday. Some heavy rain affecting particularly western parts of Scotland through the next 24 hours or so, but even some of that spreading further eastwards. We are going to see increasing amounts of cloud across parts of England and Wales, but in the east, where we have some clear skies, rural spots could just about dip into single figures. As we go through Wednesday then, a north-south split, quite cloudy and wet across many northern areas, particularly western, southwestern parts of Scotland. Here, rainfall totals could build up. There could be a little bit of localised flooding and also some disruption to travel. Further north across Scotland, it's going to be a showery day and also a few showers across parts of England and Wales, but also some bright sunny spells, and with winds a little bit lighter than they have been recently and temperatures getting to highs around 19-20, it should feel relatively warm. As we go through Thursday then, staying largely dry across more southeastern parts of the UK, but notice some wet weather that will push in across parts of Northern Ireland, into Wales, Northern England, and also across much of Scotland. Further wet weather to come, particularly across Scotland, as we go through Thursday into Friday, but into the weekend, we're going to see temperatures warming in the south.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And this is GB News now. Suella Braverman was bold once again at conference, saying that the fear of being called racist has hindered efforts to control immigration. But is she right? I'll be debating that with my panel next. Also tonight, we'll get reaction from the big stories of the day, tomorrow's papers, in the company of Carol McGiffin, Suzanne Evans and Rebecca Reid. Plus, former Home Office Minister Anne Widdecombe there. Anne made an early appearance. She came early. She has her say on Suella Braverman's speech and whether the migrant crisis would indeed get worse under Labour. Elsewhere, as the policing minister Chris Philp turns to AI to tackle crime, are facial recognition cameras a price worth paying to stop the shoplifting epidemic? We'll thrash that out later in the hour. And as trans women are finally banned from female hospital wards and the government commits to restoring biological fact in science, is the woke tide turning? I'll be speaking to the top doctor whose cries for common sense in the health service saw him targeted in a cancellation campaign. And was a heckle during the Home Secretary's speech worthy of getting the heavies in? We'll debate that when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. Tomorrow's front page is on the way too. Lots to get through, but first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. Well, we start this bulletin with some breaking news and some rather bad news as well coming to us from northern Italy. We understand at least 20 people have lost their lives after a bus carrying passengers back to a campsite crashed off an overpass near Venice in northern Italy. That's according to the city's mayor. Local media is reporting the coach veered off the road and fell close to railway lines in the district of Maestri, which is connected to Venice by a bridge. The cause of the accident still unclear, and the mayor of Venice, Mayor Luigi Brugnaro, saying a huge tragedy had taken place. That's happening a short time ago at about 7:45 UK time. The news just reaching us now in terms of the number of dead, and it is expected that the number of dead is expected to rise. Now, the Home Secretary has warned of a future hurricane of mass migration to the UK in her speech to the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today. Suella Braverman said that as well as stopping illegal migrants from coming to the UK, she's also going to make sure that legal migration is held at what she called reasonable levels. Ms Braverman says the only way into the UK is via legal routes.
The Legal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda.
Well, the Prime Minister has told GB News he's the person to deliver change to Britain. Rishi Sunak defended his record on illegal migration, saying for the first time ever the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France is down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on real policy.
You've got Keir Starmer, who, no one knows what he stands for, flip-flops left and right. The country can see through that. That's not leadership. What I'm offering is different. I know people want change. I'm the person to deliver it because we're going to do politics differently. You saw that on net zero. You'll see that this week. That's what you get from a Conservative government.
Well, the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was dismissive of disaster the UK COVID-19 inquiry's been hearing. The Bereaved Families for Justice group says there was a leadership void in the early days of the crisis. They went on to accuse Mr Johnson of cavalier public messaging just weeks before the lockdown. The government's choices between January 2020 and February 2022 will be scrutinised as part of the inquiry. A 17-year-old boy who stabbed a 15-year-old girl to death in South London last week will face a murder trial in the spring. The youth, who can't be identified due to his age, allegedly repeatedly stabbed Eliane Andam while she was on her way to school in Croydon. The boy, who knew the victim, fled the scene but was arrested over an hour later after the attack. Now, the Prince and Princess of Wales were in Cardiff today to meet members of the Windrush generation. Prince William and Kate greeting Windrush veterans and descendants during their visit, marking the start of Black History Month. They met with organisations at the Grange Pavilion Community Centre to hear about their contribution to the Welsh community. And the competitive royal couple joined members of the Youth Forum for a game of table tennis as well. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at tomorrow's front pages. And the Metro lead with, it is justice for Jade. Parents who murder a partner will have rights over their children taken away in a victory for the family of Jade Ward. The Justice Secretary has announced the 27-year-old was stabbed and strangled by controlling Russell Marsh in 2021 as their 4 sons slept. He got 25 years in jail, yet still has a say in whether the boys can go on holiday, and he sees school reports and medical records. Some comments there, common sense in the criminal justice system. Now, reacting to the big stories of the day, my superstar panel, we have columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, political commentator Suzanne Evans, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, Suella Braverman delivered an explosive speech at the Tory party conference earlier today and offered a very specific reason for the failure of past governments to control our borders. Take a look.
Now, I can't pretend that politicians have done a great job of managing immigration for the last 30 years. We were too slow to recognise the scale of the problem, too unwilling to accept that our legal framework needed to be updated. And let's be honest, far too squeamish about being smeared as racist to properly bring order to the chaos.
Is Suella Braverman right that the fear of being called racist has hindered efforts to control immigration? What do you think, Carol?
How many times have we heard all of this? I know it was a barnstorming speech today, but I don't think anybody's convinced. Nigel Farage was right earlier on. We have heard it all before. And so it just washes over you and you think, look, OK, yeah, she's right. Yes, maybe people are worried about being labelled a racist, but what are you going to do about it? What are you actually going to do about it? You've got the problem of legal migration as well as illegal migration, and the country can't manage it anymore. But it's just like there's so much electioneering going on at that conference. They're just all saying the right things, and they know people want to hear them, but I don't think anyone believes anything they say anymore.
Well,
even
indeed.
Suella.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, Rebecca, the policing of our borders didn't used to be so political, and the idea of being racist was not connected to the idea that countries have national boundaries.
I think there's always been a sense that people on the left are more open to the idea of people coming here who weren't born here, and people on the right are, generally speaking, less into that. And I think that's always existed, but I definitely think all of politics has got nastier. I think Brexit was a real turning point. It became more partisan. It became more, if you disagree with me, you are a bad person, and both sides are very bad for that. But what Suella seems to do is that the less well she does her job and the less she achieves anything, the more she turns up the dial on the rhetoric. And so she just says bigger, heavier, I would say nastier, though other people disagree, things, and still achieves nothing. So she's now making everybody cross, because if you were a big border person, she's not doing her job. And if you, like me, find things like calling people hurricanes distasteful, you're also cross. So she's not making anybody happy, and yet somehow seems to continually hold on to her job.
What is the problem with the language of hurricane? Because she's using a metaphor to suggest that it's net migration legally of 600,000. It could be a lot more than that in years to come.
It could be, but this is a bit like saying Labour could have a meat tax. Like saying, I could get a bob, I shouldn't.
Surely you don't challenge the idea that there are going to be more people seeking asylum around the world in the years ahead.
But the numbers are a complete hypothetical. Absolutely.
Well, they're not, because they've been exponentially rising for the last 10 years.
Yeah, but we don't know how many... Like, to use the word hurricane is to invoke deliberately emotive language.
It's not happening, or do you just regret the language?
I think that I think it's a deliberately provocative statement. I think she's deliberately trying to toe that line where she's not saying rivers, because rivers and the whole Enoch.
I mean, could she just say lots of people or something? I mean, what's the right word?
A large number of people. Even too many would be less... Like, hurricane is deliberately...
So,
as a writer, I'm saying that every single word in that speech has been thought about, and hurricane is a deliberately nasty, frightening word to use.
This is absolutely typical. Let's talk about the language and ignore the issue. The issue is that in 2 years, we will have had 1 million people come here legally. That is a city the size of Birmingham.
Under which government?
It doesn't matter which government. It was the same under all of the governments.
Whose fault is it?
It's not about that,
Labour
started.
It's on their watch.
About the fact
Labour haven't been in power for 13 years.
Can you honestly tell me that if Keir Starmer was Prime Prime Minister, these numbers would be lower?
We don't.
Can you say that? Can you say that with a straight face?
Hypothetical. It's completely
Well, why don't you
hypothetical.
answer it?
They don't want them
Yes,
lower,
I think they
though.
might well be, because there are plenty of Labour voters who are very big on borders.
Okay.
But the idea that you can sit there being like, we're going to blame somebody else. Sorry, you're quite right.
Thank you very much. I mean, to say it's hypothetical does not mean this question does not need an answer. I don't think it would be any better under Keir Starmer. As I said, 1 million people, city the size of Birmingham, 2 years, or a city the size of Manchester every year, whichever government's in power, whichever party's in power, that is insustainable. It puts enormous pressure on the country, and it's got to stop. Carol, I have a lot of sympathy with what you're saying. We've all heard a lot of rhetoric. We've all heard a lot of talk. Where is the action? And you're right. So far, we've had a lot of strong words. We've had a lot of strong words from Conservatives. I agree with you too, Rebecca, since 2010. Nothing has happened. Nothing has changed. The situation has just got worse.
What about that language? Hurricane, we've heard the Home Secretary talk about an invasion previously.
Yeah, I don't think that's inappropriate. I think it is. If you are talking about a city the size of Manchester coming here every year, in addition to other people who are already leaving the country, this is net migration we're talking about, remember, that is pretty frightening. Where are those people going to live? Where are their children going to go to school? How are they going to get GP appointments? How are they going to get hospital appointments? It's already up to its neck with the people that we have living here.
1 million people in 2 years, is
Where
that
is the
frightening,
space?
Rebecca?
It terrifies me.
It doesn't terrify me personally, because I haven't felt any particular difficulty with it. I live in a very diverse area and I feel very comfortable with it. I understand why it does terrify people, but I think the real question is, how do you reduce that number, if you feel it should be reduced, in sensible ways, which means that people who are genuinely in danger in other countries still can come here for safety? And the idea that we should somehow be like...
But Rebecca, come on. All the people in those boats, the majority of them, and you know this, are not seeking safety. They've come from France, for crying out loud. The thing is with that, that's what frightens me. It terrifies me, actually, when you see these boatloads of people going into Lampedusa and into the UK and all over Europe. Nobody knows who they are. Yeah. They do not carry identity papers. They're told to throw them away. You can't check who they are. You don't know where they're from. What will they be doing? They could be a terrible danger to the people.
I don't think anyone thinks this.
And Suella Braverman is raising the alarm. Perhaps that's why she's using such incendiary language.
How long has she been in this job? She hasn't done anything about it. How long has she been in this job? If you are
really... They could stop the boats tomorrow if they wanted to.
If you're really frightened about it, and this is your job, then bloody fix it. But don't just stand there deliberately stirring up culture wars and using the word woke 15 times an hour.
Fix it. One option is to take Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights.
They still won't do anything.
If that were to happen, there would be uproar from the left.
And they won't do it. No, the reason they won't do it is because they love the ECHR as a hook to hang all the problems on. Oh, it's just the ECHR. It's just the ECHR. There are plenty of other reasons.
If they come out of it, they will be condemned by your mate, Keir Starmer.
They would be condemned by me, because there are a lot of very sensible things in there.
They'll be
condemned.
Rebecca, they'll be condemned for taking action, something you've said Suella Braverman is not doing. You can't have it both ways.
It will not result in action. That is not the only reason they're not doing anything. There is no reason they couldn't have a safe, humane processing place in the UK around the ECHR.
They do. I hate this phrase, no safe legal routes. There are.
Then they can't send them back. Anyone who enters this country never has to leave. And it's the same with Europe.
I think we can all...
the immigrants if you get here, that's it.
Can we all agree that the boats crisis, the small boats crisis, is a humanitarian, economic and national security disaster for the country? Can we all agree on that?
I would certainly say that the people trafficking aspect of it is unforgivable and not
So the government are taking part in by going to pick them up.
They don't. But then what else do you do? Just leave people drowning in the sea?
If we can establish the idea that the boats need to be stopped, which even Keir Starmer is saying, let's look at net migration, because I think that the illegal boat crossings are something of a distraction. It's a big problem, but the bigger issue is the legal net migration of 600k last year. As you said, 1 million in 2 years. What is the correct level of legal migration in this country, one at a time? What do you think, Suzanne? Can you give me a number? Because I've said last night in my manifesto for the country, 200,000 max.
I think that's too much. I personally, if there's one net zero policy I support, it would be a net zero migration policy for the next 5 years.
Wouldn't that cripple the economy?
No, because it would be net, so you'd still have people leaving. It would be a sort of one in, one out policy. I'd also say that anyone coming here should have their own private health insurance. They should not have any benefits until they've been here for at least 5 years and paying into the system. And we shouldn't take any unskilled migrants at all, because there are people in this country that could do that work. I absolutely appreciate there's got to to be some immigration. We've got to have some skilled migration. I'd never be against that. But the way in which unskilled people are coming in, basically taking jobs from British people, is wrong.
Rebecca, briefly, what's a good number for you, the right number that come into this country legally every year?
I would be pulling a number out of the air to pick any number. I think I can understand why people grasp onto the idea
Is
of net zero.
600,000 too many?
I honestly do not know. I have no idea what the correct number is. I would say the important thing...
As a parent that wants to get their child into the local school,
I can get my
as somebody that wants to drive in roads that are not traffic jam.
I'd like a driving licence first, and I really would like a driving licence.
Yeah, GP's appointments, all the rest of it, the real-world implications.
But none of those things, maybe I'm biased and I'm not experienced any of these things, but I'm not.
You're a middle-class, privileged woman who doesn't have to...
using state healthcare and state schools and all state provision.
If your child, don't want to make it personal, as any of our kids, right? But if a relative of yours has to travel 10, 15 miles to go to school every day because all the local schools are oversubscribed.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, but clearly that's going to happen.
The three schools...
With these numbers, surely that's inevitable.
But, OK, so two things, first of all.
Where's everyone going to go?
Well,
where's the
infrastructure? In theory, if you have more people, you have more infrastructure. What I was trying to say is that the bigger numbers... Well, because if you bring the right blend of people over, then you already have a good mix. The issue here is that you need to bring the right people who you need doing the right things.
Carol, I'm going to get in trouble with the team. We are against the clock, but what is a good number for you, legal net migration per year?
Well, I'm with David Cameron, although he never achieved that either, down to the tens of thousands. But if they are going to keep the numbers up, improve the infrastructure before you do anything else, because everybody suffers.
What do you think? It's all about your opinions, so let me know what you think the correct level of legal net migration into the country is. Mark at gbnews.com. I'll read out the numbers shortly, but coming up, as the policing minister, Chris Filt, turns to AI to tackle crime, are facial recognition cameras a price worth paying to stop the shoplifting epidemic? My panel will thrash that out later tonight, and I think you can see they're on fire this evening. Next up, as trans women are banned from female hospital wards and the government commit to restoring biological fact in science, is the woke tide turning? I'll be speaking to Professor Carol Sikora, the top doctor whose cries for common sense in the health service saw him targeted in a cancellation campaign. You won't believe his story. That's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, what is the correct number of legal net migration into the country from your point of view? Mark at gbnews.com. How about this? The number for net migration should be 0, says Mark. A 1 in, 1 out policy is required, and those allowed in must have a trade. A couple of other emails before we crack on. Alan says, Mark, ban all immigration for 5 years, possibly 10, until the country has stabilised. How about this from Malcolm, Mark at gbnews.com. Malcolm says, hi, Mark. 46 countries in the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. 149 countries independent of it. Mark there suggesting that he'd like to be on that latter list. Jackie says, hi, Mark. The problem is the people who live in nice areas and don't feel there is a problem are fine with mass immigration. Try and think of the bigger picture, says Jackie. Meanwhile, Margaret, yes, we have a lot of rhetoric, but it's the law stopping the government from carrying out their plans, says Margaret. Now, Matthew, do I have time for a couple more emails? Let's have a look. OK, first of all, Peter has said, Mark, industry presses for open doors because this depresses wages. Industry has no interest in the cost of excessive low-skill economic immigration. But floods of car washers is the result. Look, this show is all about opinions. Let me know what your view is. Of course, there's plenty of research that suggests that there is a direct link between immigration into the country and economic growth. And it's certainly true that businesses over the years have benefited from the cheap labour and sometimes the skills and expertise that migrants bring to the country. So it is all about opinions. Let me know what you think. Keep those views coming. OK, shall we crack on? Speaking at the Tory party conference today, Health Secretary Steve Barclay announced a ban on trans patients in female hospital wards. But esteemed former NHS consultant Professor Carol Sikora called for exactly that long before Barclay came to his senses. And Sikora's outspoken criticism of the NHS has made him a few enemies. Even this week, an NHS supplier threatened to pull their sponsorship of a Spectator magazine event unless Sikora was removed from the panel. But in a brave stand against cancel culture, the Spectator refused to give in, and the event went ahead without a sponsor. Well, I'm delighted to say that Professor Carol Sikora joins me now. And Carol, great to see you again. You'll never be cancelled on my watch.
They were very generous, Mark. No, it was a bit of a shock to see that people really thought... about 7 years ago, I said on Newsnight the NHS was the last bastion of communism, and I was never forgiven for that. And the people that don't forgive you are not the doctors, the professionals, the healthcare people. It's the management. They don't like criticism. And my point at the Conservative conference and the talk today was that the first thing to improve is about cancer services, how we can improve Britain's cancer service. The first thing you have to do is admit there's a problem. And that's what NHS England, the management in it, will never do. They come out with very good crafted PR to imply there is no real problem, we're putting money on it, and it's all going to be solved very quickly. I think that is the issue. If you don't admit there's a problem, you can't move forward. And, you know, there is a backlog for cancer. We all know it. There's a trouble getting to see your GP. There's a trouble getting scans and x-rays. So let's admit it and see what we can do about it. We did it so well for COVID, Mark. I mean, we did it really well. The vaccination program, you know, on my mobile phone here, I've got all the batch numbers of my vaccines that I had. Now, what else? Where else in the NHS can you get any information on your phone? Almost nowhere. So
Well,
that was a
indeed.
crime.
I've been looking into your attempted cancellation by this NHS supplier. And Carol, I understand that your great crime was to be critical of lockdowns. What is your appraisal of how lockdowns have impacted public health in this country? Were they worth it?
It's a huge impact on everything: heart disease, cancer, stroke. I mean, the one I know most about, obviously, is cancer, because I'm an oncologist. And when you look at it, the number of people that will die from cancer over the next 3 years because of spread of the cancer beyond the primary organ is going to be massive, much greater than COVID, for example, where the average age was 83. So I really think we have to take a change in policy. And what I don't like is the inquiry doesn't seem to be investigating this. It's trying to almost cover up what went wrong. So I've been branded as a heretic about the lockdown policy, but for cancer, I'm certainly right. And I suspect my cardiology friend, heart specialist friend, tells me for cardiology, it's the same. The number of deaths from heart attacks will be much greater over the last few years and for the next few years than it would have been without lockdown.
Well, look, I think you've been very courageous. You've also pointed out the realities of biological sex without being in any way transphobic, Carol. The government are now going to ban trans women in female hospital wards and will protect basic biological principles in science. About time?
Yeah, about time. I think there's no doubt that I think Steve Barclay made the announcement yesterday. There's no doubt that we've got to be logical about it. You know, the ultimate, of course, is not to have mixed wards. So you just have single rooms, as you do in private hospitals. And the NHS is gradually getting there. It'll take another decade probably to get there completely. You know, the reason for having these open plan wards when I was a medical student, where the nurses all sit round, they're called Nightingale wards, everybody's in rows, is because the nurses could see the patient from the end of the ward. Now we have all sorts of technology, electronic wearables, gizmos. You know, every orifice can have a gizmo in it. You can measure anything in real time, and it can be displayed on a computer at the end of the ward. You don't need to see the patients quite as you used to.
And may I congratulate you for your timely use of the word orifice. Carol, we'll catch up soon. Great to see you in such fine fettle. The brilliant oncologist, Professor Carol Sikora. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, folks, lots more to get through. But can I just give you a statement from Professor Phil Banfield, Council Chair of the British Medical Association, who said all patients deserve dignity and access to health care, which includes having their identity respected. It's beyond belief that on day 2 of the biggest industrial action the NHS has ever seen, the Health Secretary has chosen to make a call that would require trusts to follow guidance which is in breach of the Equality Act. This will amount to nothing except more hurt and harm to trans patients. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.com. No trans women, that is a biological male identifying as female, in women's wards. Let me know your thoughts. But coming up in Uncancelled, is Suella Braverman right that the migrant crisis would be worse under Labour? Former Home Office Minister Anne Widdecombe has her say on Suella's speech later on. But next in the media buzz, as the policing minister Chris Philp turns to AI to tackle crime, are facial recognition cameras a price worth paying to stop the shoplifting epidemic? My panel will thrash that out next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Well, let's return now to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. More front pages have arrived. The newspaper, Braverman's hardline job application to become Tory leader. Home Secretary claims that a hurricane of migrants is coming to Britain amid outcry from Labour and some in her own party. She argues a privileged woke minority with luxury beliefs is damaging Britain. The Daily Mail. What a wig lifter. This was the first properly spellbinding, dramatically assured speech seen at a conference for years. That is a diary sketch by Quentin Letts at The Mail. Predictable voices will hate it, but even they must admit that Sylvester, as he calls her, Suella, was one heck of a blow. What a wig lifter of a speech. If Michael Fabricant was there, his top knot must have been blown all the way to Bolton. I've got to say, Quentin Letts knows how to write. So there you go, giving his plaudits to Suella Braverman's speech, which I'll be debating shortly with the fearless Anne Widdecombe. The Daily Mirror, another day of excuses. 13 unlucky for us today. The PM will blame our country's problems on the political system, but remind us, Rishi, how many years have the Tories had to fix Britain? Daily Telegraph, last but not least, Sunak, I'll change the status quo. Rishi Sunak will tomorrow vow to end 30 years of the status quo in politics as he tries to position himself as the change candidate for the next general election. In his first speech to the Tory party conference as leader, Mr Sunak will seek to paint Keir Starmer as the continuity choice for voters. The PM is set to announce that the second leg of HS2 from Birmingham to Manchester will be scrapped, ending weeks of speculation and scaling back a flagship Tory building project. Johnson's COVID decisions were bipolar, reveals Sir Patrick Valance's diary, is the other story. And what about this from Alison Pearson, good friend of the show, regular pundit. I'm a Tory and I want them to lose the next election. Wow. Well, look, she knows how to drop a few truth bombs. I believe she's back on Monday. Now, let's get a reaction to the big stories of the day. Columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, a very old and good friend of mine, let me tell you.
Excuse me.
You don't forget you were 12 when I first met you.
Walk straight into that one, Mark.
I bounced you on my knee. let's not go into the details in the current climate. Get both of us in trouble. What about political commentator Suzanne Evans, who I didn't know when she was a little girl, but I wish I had. How wrong did that sound? And author and journalist Rebecca Reed, who's still a... No, OK. All right. Now, with the shoplifting... we've suddenly got to go serious, folks, because with a shoplifting epidemic sweeping the nation, Britain has been sliding slowly into a lawless state. But in what he has hailed as a game-changer, Policing Minister Chris Philp announced yesterday that officers will check every thief caught on CCTV against all official databases, including passport and immigration records. The policy will be part of the police's new zero-tolerance approach, which will see them investigate every crime where there is reasonable line of inquiry. So what do we think about this? Is this a good way, Rebecca, to tackle crime or Orwellian overreach?
I hate surveillance. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. I think it's really a slippery slope to people being overly surveilled. And what always worries me is that this kind of thing often seems like it could lead to ID cards, which is my worst fear. I really don't like it. I'm a very libertarian person. I like low intervention from a government. I also would point out that the majority of people who are proper crime lords don't have passports. People are not going on holiday once a year to the Dordogne and being fully registered. People who are dangerous avoid systems like this for a reason.
OK, what do you think about this, Suzanne? AI is the answer.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about this. I'm actually pretty anti-surveillance and Big Brother and all that sort of stuff as well. But we're talking about criminals here. We're talking about burglary, we're talking about theft, shoplifting, a crime that's actually, I think, been terribly underrated. It's costing retailers £1 billion a year, plus they're having to spend another $700 million on security issues. It's gone off the scale. We've had people like the Co-op talking about no-go areas. Crime in their shops is so bad. Tesco and Sainsbury's staff having to wear body cams to get evidence, video surveillance evidence. John Lewis inviting the police to come into their cafes for free coffee in the hope that the presence will deter shoplifters. We've got to do something about this. And actually, if it means protecting those retail staff, I'm kind of all for this. And I also think we've got to catch these criminals. We've got to deal with them. And I think also we know that there are people who are avoiding immigration, who are here illegally. They're also committing crimes as well. And I think this kind of initiative will help root those out as well.
So, Carol, the idea is that when you go into Tesco, you're on the self-checkout and it's got an image of your face. And then if you steal something, then the authorities can link that to your passport image and arrest you. What's not to like?
What's not to like?
By the way, for you, it's Waitrose, I should add.
No, I never go in Waitrose. I never go in Tesco. I never go in those shops. And I will not use the self-checkout, ever. I will stand there for hours and wait for the one-man checkout because I absolutely hate them.
So where do you go for your groceries, then? Like the corner shop or something?
Well, I'm not advertising, am I?
No.
Yeah, the corner shop.
They've all got facial recognition, haven't they, now? They've all got the automated...
No, they haven't. No, actually, they have not. No, but what I was going to say was I think this is a classic case of problem, reaction, solution. Now, the government started this problem when it basically said, look, if it's under 200 quid that you're nicking, you're kind of good to go. So they stopped prosecuting people for it. And it has created a horrible epidemic of crime in supermarkets. My sister works in a supermarket and she'll tell you how bad it is. It's serious. And you can have security on the door. They can't do anything about it. They don't do anything about it. Everyone knows you can't do anything about it because they won't get prosecuted. So, yes, those people need to be prosecuted. But the way that they've reacted to this problem that they created is to say, OK, well, let's use AI, facial recognition, which is Rebecca says, and I can't believe I'm agreeing with you so much tonight. It happens, I'm sorry. This is the path to digital ID. This is what they want to have everywhere. Facial recognition cameras everywhere. That's what the whole 5G thing is about, because they need it for all of that. And that will all be linked to digital ID, which is terrifying. Okay. There are loads of other things being linked to that as well, like the digital currency. So, people need to rebel against it.
What do you think, folks? Are you willing to give up some of your civil liberties in order for crime to be tackled? Do you like the idea of your face being scanned when you're buying a shepherd's pie from Sainsbury's or Morrison's or the Co-op? Let me know, mark at gbnews.com. Coming up, was heckling during the Home Secretary's speech worthy of getting the heavies in? We'll debate that when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, is Suella Braverman right that the migrant crisis would be worse under Labour? Former Home Office Minister Anne Widdecombe has her say on Suella's speech. And let me tell you, there will be fireworks. Anne Widdecombe is next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, folks, lots to get through. I shall respond to some of your excellent emails very shortly. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this evening, former Conservative minister, best-selling author and television personality, Anne Widdecombe. Now, Suella Braverman warned about the dangers of a Labour government opening our borders to more migrants today at the conference. Take a listen.
The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming. We are the party to confront the challenge of global migration in the years ahead, not a Labour Party that will open the borders and then cry racism to anyone who objects.
Well, powerful words, but Anne, you told me on Sunday that Suella Braverman is just that. It's talk, talk, talk. Did you hear anything convincing today? Did you hear anything of substance?
No, and I think that is my principal objection. I think she is quite right that there is an awful lot more immigration to come. There's enormous movements across the world. I think she's right on that score. But my problem with Suella is that she can talk and she can analyse, but she doesn't actually do anything. So my question to Suella is very simple. What are you going to do? Not say, do.
Do you think that the Prime Minister will announce that he's willing to exit the ECHR in his keynote speech tomorrow? Is that the rabbit in the hat, Anne? And is it going to come out of that hat?
Well, he might well be tempted to announce it. But just think what's happened with the Rwanda mess. You know, that was announced. And we're still waiting. And the problem with coming out of ECHR is it's highly complex. There are lots of interlocking treaties. It won't be easy. And I do not believe, it's possible, but not easy. I don't believe, on showing so far, that this government, let alone the Labour Party, have got any grasp of it at all.
Well, Anne, in my big opinion on Sunday, I said that the Tories are terrible, but Labour are worse. Do you think that's true for these issues around illegal and legal migration?
Yes, I do. I think that is quite true. And with regard to many other issues as well, I mean, not just immigration. Labour is a much worse option. We all know that, at least those of us who study these things know it. But that doesn't mean that the Tory party is delivering. It isn't. And they mustn't be let off the hook. And there's something else as well. They seem to be adopting, piecemeal, but adopting policies advocated by Reform UK. Now, when a major party starts copying a minor party, then you know that that major party is running out of steam. And it really is copying us. It copied us over at EULA's, it copied us over many things. And I'm sure that on Saturday, when the Reform UK conference takes place, I'm sure that all that will be pointed out.
Indeed. Now, Anne, what is the key difference between, let's say, the Conservatives and Labour's policy on stopping the boats and Reform UK? What was so compelling about Richard Tice's plan that encouraged you to join the party?
Very straightforwardly, that he has modelled it on a plan that was already successful elsewhere, i.e. Australia. Now, Australia's got a vast coastline, but it still manages to turn back the boats. Why can't we? Why are we so afraid of turning back the boats? Because that is the key to all of this. There are two keys. One is the deterrent. And I've said this before, you know, routinely detain everybody in secure accommodation. That's a deterrent. But the other key is simply not to let them get here in the first place.
What is the difference, though, between Australia and the United Kingdom? Do we not face more legal and logistical barriers than the Australians?
Well, only because we are too feeble to take the necessary steps, yes. I mean, we face ECHR for a start. I mean, you know, just as a legal barrier, that's an obvious one. And look what they've done to us over Rwanda. So we do face legal barriers. Logistically, we haven't tried, so we don't really know. We haven't tried.
But Anne, aren't you up a gum tree with this idea that we can somehow unilaterally stop the boats in the way that the Australians did? After all, we would face the mother of all lawsuits, wouldn't we? Probably trade sanctions and much beyond.
Oh, I'm sure we would face the mother of all lawsuits. I don't know that we would face trade sanctions because actually we wouldn't be doing anything that was unlawful. So I don't think that. But I do think that there would be an awful lot of legal action, which is why I say that saying we're coming out of ECHR is grand. It's fine. It'll get applause, you know, standing ovation probably from the party. But it ain't going to happen.
But is Richard Tice's plan a real-world plan? I mean, isn't this just wishful thinking that somehow the boats will be turned away, people will be arrested, and it will all stop?
No, it's certainly not wishful thinking, which is why we've come up with the plan. If it was just wishful thinking, it would be a very waffly plan, but it's not. We've set out exactly what we want to do, and we are basing it, yes, on the success that they've had in Australia. And there's nothing wrong.
Anne, what about, sorry to interrupt you, Anne, what about Keir Starmer? I mean, he has argued that he's going to smash those criminal gangs that, of course, traffic people around the world, and he's also going to go into partnership with the EU to tackle the problem. His argument is it is Europe-wide, so he's going to negotiate a better deal.
Yeah, like we did with France, presumably. You know, when we paid them an awful lot of money to stop people leaving their coastline. And what did they do? Ushered them over. So I don't put any store at all on cooperation with any of the EU. I just don't. We've got to solve our own problems. We've just got to do that. And we don't do it. We sit back and we wait for somebody else to do it. Well, nobody else.
I'm so grateful that you've joined us tonight. It's always the highlight of the show when you're on, and I understand that you're nursing a cold, so thank you so much for bearing with us and appearing on tonight's programme. But we wanted to have an emergency COBRA meeting with you because it has been such a big day for the Home Secretary, and you are a former Home Office Minister. Quick preview of Rishi Sunak's speech tomorrow. Do you think that... well, how important is the speech? And is there anything that he might say that could really change the game for him, setting aside stopping the boats?
It is a crucial speech. If anything goes wrong with that speech tomorrow, that's the next election pretty well written off. You can never be 100% certain, but pretty well. So this speech is crucial, and he will be under an awful lot of stress as he hones it and delivers it. But is there a rabbit in the hat? Well, there is ECHR, but as I say, I don't believe it's going to happen. If it's something like the cancellation of HS2, well, we all know there are divided opinions on that. So coming up with something that is going to have everybody in the conference hall going yay, 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 is going to be quite a challenge for him. And sadly, and I've observed this many times, the old traditions of loyalty no longer apply. And if he starts to make a mess of it, they won't be gentle.
And Anne, the cancellation of the northern leg of HS2, yes or no for you? Is it the right move to cancel it?
I don't believe it is. I've long believed that we should be competitive with Europe, which have high-speed links all over. And we shouldn't get into a situation where if you arrive in London or maybe even Birmingham, everything just stops. So I do believe that it's a worthwhile investment, but mishandled, the understatement of the century. I mean, it is unbelievable that not just one minister, but successive ministers and successive governments have just made an almighty hash of it.
Anne, speedy recovery, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday for Mark Dolan tonight. It's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. And let's start with Carol McGiffin. Who's your hero today?
My Greatest Britain today is a young man called Kieran Chapman. Now, I don't know if you heard about the sycamore tree that was ruthlessly destroyed on Hadrian's Wall at the weekend. He took his tools and a little tree that he bought in a garden centre, went down to that gap and replanted a new tree for everyone to cheer them up, because it was such a loved tree. Everyone loved it, and it's heartbreaking to see it felled like that. So I hope they find the culprits.
That's a brilliant nomination. Suzanne, how about you, your Greatest Britain?
So mine's Home Secretary Suella Braverman, not just because of what she said about immigration today in her speech, but because what she said about gender ideology and about woke luxury beliefs and about stopping Just Stop Oil. I hope she does it.
There you go. Well, of course, that's to be discovered. How about you, Rebecca, your Greatest Britain?
Mine's Sophie Rhodes from Sky, who politely but very firmly grilled Claire Coutinho on this claim that there was going to be a meat tax, which is never going. It is not happening. It was never suggested. It was completely made up. It was beautiful journalism.
It was, and I've got to say, Sophie Ridge is a brilliant broadcaster. I'm going to give it to Carol and Kieran Chapman because I like a good news story.
It is good news.
That was such a nice one.
Now, how about Union Jackasses? Carol, who's caught your ire today?
Well, my Union Jackass tonight is the National Trust for tearing Kieran's tree down and saying you can't plant a tree there. Yeah,
what?
they did.
Does that happen already?
They did. Yes, they did. So they are my Union Jackass.
Killjoys, the least of their crimes. OK, apparently it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so they are perhaps bound by some rules. But look, how about you, Suzanne, Union Jackass?
Well, I don't think I can beat that, but I'll try. It's going to be Suella's heckler, Andrew Boff, because I'm sorry, Andrew, there is such a thing as gender ideology, and it is destroying children's lives.
Oh, succinct as ever. How about you? Last but not least, Rebecca.
Well, mine was going to be Robert Jenrick for his surveillance plan, but I'm on the tree hype now. As a National Trust member, I am furious. I'm changing my vote. I'm a National Trust truther now.
There you go. Well, that's got to be the one. Listen, we will absolutely give it to Andrew Boff, because let me tell you that there is such a thing as gender ideology. Suzanne is so right. Thank you to my brilliant panel tonight, Carol, Suzanne and Rebecca. Listen, Patrick is looking after the shop tomorrow and Thursday. I'm back for Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for your company. It's been a really busy 5 or 6 or 7 shows in a row. Thanks for making me feel so welcome. I'll catch you soon. Let me tell you that Headliners is next. Well done to the team the other side of the glass.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather bulletin. We have some pretty wet weather to come across northern parts through the next 24 hours, but further south it is a drier picture, and that's because of this area of high pressure that's going to build and lead to a quieter spell as we go through the rest of the week for southern areas. Further north and tightly packed isobars show that it's blustery, and we have a weather system that's going to push in as we go through tonight and into Wednesday. Some heavy rain affecting particularly western parts of Scotland through the next 24 hours or so, but even some of that spreading further eastwards. We are going to see increasing amounts of cloud across parts of England and Wales, but in the east, where we have some clear skies, rural spots could just about dip into single figures. As we go through Wednesday then, a north-south split, quite cloudy and wet across many northern areas, particularly western, southwestern parts of Scotland. Here, rainfall totals could build up. There could be a little bit of localised flooding and also some disruption to travel. Further north across Scotland, it's going to be a showery day and also a few showers across parts of England and Wales, but also some bright sunny spells, and with winds a little bit lighter than they have been recently and temperatures getting to highs around 19-20, it should feel relatively warm. As we go through Thursday then, staying largely dry across more southeastern parts of the UK, but notice some wet weather that will push in across parts of Northern Ireland, into Wales, Northern England and also across much of Scotland. Further wet weather to come, particularly across Scotland as we go through Thursday into Friday, but into the weekend we're going to see temperatures warming in the south.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.